Good evening and welcome to the Ogden City Council for February 19th, 2013. Can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Ogden City Council for February 19th, 2013. Let the roll call reflect that all council members are present. And just before we begin, we'd just like to mention that if anyone needs assistance or any translation, to let us know and we can make those arrangements necessary. So with that, we'll move on in the agenda and have Vice Chair Garner lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
For the audience, please rise and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now, if we could observe a moment of silence. Thank you. First on the agenda is reports from the Planning Commission, and if we could turn the time over to the administration, who will be Rick. Thank you.
Chair, members of the council, it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. And it's also a pleasure to be with the community as well as we talk about the Jefferson Community Plan. Thank you, Greg. As we go through this dialogue and discussion, I just want to kind of go through a little bit of the brief history. We also have a slide in Spanish on the side here. We've been involved in various meetings throughout this past few years. In 2011, we started with our first open house meeting at the Odyssey Elementary School, and
Why don't you hold on a second?
You bet.
Why don't you wait a minute until they turn this off so everyone
Okay.
can hear? Have him wait just a minute.
Okay.
They're going to turn the system on. So.
We're going to just wait 1 minute while they turn the air off, and then maybe that'll help us all hear a little better and speak a little more clearly.
I think that's a little bit better. Chair, members of the council. The Jefferson Community Plan, we've been involved with this process for about almost a year and a half to 2 years now. We started back in October of 2011, and at that time we kicked it off with a meeting at the Odyssey Elementary School, and I see a lot of the people that were here at that meeting at this time, and they're still very avid, and we appreciate their comments and their concerns. From that, we had a steering committee, and we had various people from that open house that were involved with the community, and they gave us feedback and what they would like to see happen in the Jefferson community. Then we took back their comments to the community again at the Odyssey Elementary School and presented that to the community, and then looked at their feedback, and then we met with the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission gave comments and direction, and then they had a public hearing, and then we had the opportunity to meet with you in a work session just this past January and received comments from you, and now we're at the City Council. Just so the community is aware, these were the individuals who were involved with the steering committee, and they spent countless hours, and it was greatly appreciated, the time that they freely gave and the input that they gave. The community plan, the area in red on the right, is the original boundaries of the Jefferson community. It started at 27th Street and went to 36th Street, and then the western boundaries and the eastern boundaries were Wall Avenue and Washington Boulevard. The area in blue is the area that we discussed, should we include this in the Jefferson community? because right now it's part of the rail yard. And is it fair for these people to wait until we do a rail yard plan, or should we look at including this as part of the community plan at the present time? And we looked at some of the similarities. There's residents in that area, there's commercial in that area, there's some manufacturing in that area, the malls in that area. And so the consensus was from the committee and from the Planning Commission that we look at including the area in blue in the Jefferson Community Plan. The things that were discussed in the Jefferson Community Plan were 3 different items: land use, parks and recreation, and transportation. And I'm going to talk briefly about each one of those areas. The first one being land use. And the topics in land use is how do we strengthen the single-family neighborhoods? We want those areas to thrive. We want them to be successful. And then ensure the success of major commercial corridors. In this area, we have the Wall Avenue, we have Washington Boulevard, 36th Street, 30th, 31st Street. Some great commercial corridors, but they could also be strengthened and enhanced. So how can we do that? And we'll talk about that. Also, we have some really neat bungalow-style homes in this area, and we also have some extremely older homes too. And how can we preserve some of these historic dwellings? And then how can we strengthen some of the multifamily neighborhoods? So I'm going to talk briefly about how can we strengthen the single-family neighborhoods. In the last community meeting that we had at the Odyssey Elementary School, we had Officer Williams come, and he's actually the community police officer for this area. And most of the residents, and including myself, we had no idea that we actually had an officer assigned to this area. And so how can we get the word out to the people in the community that we have an actual community police officer in this area? And the people said, can we get the number and things like that? And so we provided that for them at that time. And they were really happy that they had a community police officer, but how can we get the word out? And so one of the major things in here is strengthening the neighborhood by providing more police presence and letting people know that we actually have a community police officer in this area. The next element that we looked at was how can we preserve and strengthen some of the existing neighborhoods, the architecture in this area. And some things we looked at here is we've had some homes that have been built in this area that really don't relate to the existing bungalow-style homes and the architecture in this area. So how can we help accomplish that? And so we wanted to look at ways in which we have context-sensitive building designs so that they do relate with the existing home. So if a home is placed in the neighborhood, it strengthens the neighborhood. It doesn't bring it down. And then let's back up just a minute. Here we go. The next element that we looked at was areas where we can make some immediate changes to the zoning map. On this section right here, my eyes aren't that good right there, but between 31st and 32nd Street and right along Lincoln Avenue, there's this section of manufacturing right by a neighborhood area. And is it appropriate to have manufacturing right next to a neighborhood area? And so as we looked at this, and are these buildings being used, most of them, in fact all of them, are vacant. And they're in white there. And so we looked at that and we talked with the steering committee and the planning commission, and they felt that this would be appropriate to be rezoned to possibly a C2 zoning, but not have manufacturing right next to a neighborhood area. And that was one thing that was looked at. Another element that was looked at was how can we improve some of our code enforcement and some of the issues that come with lack of code enforcement in the area. And with this, we drove through the community and the steering committee and some of the planning commissioners. I noticed that we have a lot of people parking in the front lawn. And does that really send out a good message? Well, we should have adequate parking in the area, but educating people that they shouldn't be doing certain things that are going to start to bring property values down. And so that was one element. of strengthening the neighborhood. Another one was educating the landlords and renters that they have a responsibility, that the landlords need to keep the property up, but also educating the renters that they also have an obligation to keep the property clean as well. Another element that was looked at is, can we provide some incentives to help these residents in this area with possible grants, and then also look at some type of matching grants for improving some of the utilities in these areas. When we looked at the existing utilities, there's some areas that need to be upgraded and enhanced, and so how can we accomplish this and still provide adequate service? Another element in the community plan, oh, there we go, was looking at the 30th and 31st Street corridor between Washington and Wall Avenue. In this area, we have a mix of residence and commercial, and these streets are more, they have higher speeds and higher traffic volume, and as a result, it's probably not the greatest place for residential homes in this area. While some of them have stayed there for quite some time, they haven't really thrived. And so what can we do to help improve this area? And so what we looked at was some type of community commercial overlay zone in this section. We wanted to have some type of commercial happen in this area, but at the same time we wanted that to transition into the residential neighborhoods, and so that it would look at architecture elements that would start to make that transition from commercial to residential, so that it strengthens those corridors, the 30th and 31st Street corridor, but at the same time it enhances the neighborhood. Another element that we looked at was, how can we improve the success of some of the major commercial corridors in this area? We have a plan for the Wall Avenue corridor, but we don't have a plan for the 31st Street and the Washington Boulevard corridor. And so looking at ways in which we can get that in place so that we can improve those corridors. Also along Wall Avenue, there's some opportunities that we can accomplish by just taking some sterile facades and putting murals on them. This is a picture of the dog food plant along there, and you know, what can we do to kind of enhance that and make that more aesthetic? Another element that we looked at was along Wall Avenue. What can we do to improve that corridor and just not have auto-related type uses? And so that was something that the steering committee felt was appropriate and important, is that we have more than just auto-related uses along Wall Avenue, because the community wanted something more than just auto-related uses, because most people in the community aren't just going to go out and buy an automobile every day. They would like to see a large grocery store. They would like to see some amenities that are going to benefit their community. Also, there's a small section of commercial between 30th and 27th Street that's really narrow. And is there some things that we can do with that piece of property to make it more enhanced? And a pedestrian corridor was suggested right in this section. Also, looking at some of the historic buildings in this area, the larger buildings right here on 27th Street, great architecture, and then one up in the top right-hand corner is little bungalow homes. And there's quite a few of these throughout the area, and looking at ways in which we can get them on the registers so that they can get some type of tax credits to help them do some improvements to their homes was another element that was suggested in the community plan. Another element was some of the multifamily buildings in this area have turned their back to the street. And what I mean by that is the homes, the front appearance of the homes is not facing the street. The back of the home is facing the public street, and so it creates more of a sterile appearance. And the one on Lincoln Avenue and 28th Street, the homes are not facing the street, and so it's turned its back on it. Where a good example is on Lincoln and 32nd Street, where it faces the street and it has more of an appearance. And so looking at context-sensitive design with multifamily. Another element that was considered was the section between 27th Street and 31st Street and 30th Street, excuse me. And in this area, it's been zoned for commercial for many, many years, but nothing's happened. And it stayed single family, and it's remaining to this day mostly single family. There's 22 residential properties in this area and 12 service or sales properties in this area. And so the suggestion was to look at rezoning this area from CP3 to R4 as a guideline down the road. The next general topic was looking at open space. And we have some great parks in this area, but there's also some things that can be done to enhance those parks. The first one is looking at the Jefferson School, and the second one is looking at the Marshall White Park, where we're located right now, and things that we can do to help improve those facilities. They felt that the Jefferson Park, a lot of great things happening there, but they want to make sure that those are maintained and enhanced. At the Marshall White Park, they feel that there's some amenities that could be improved and enhanced, but they wanted to address those and the needs of the neighborhood as they change. And so down the road, there may be certain needs at the Jefferson Park that the community would like to see happen, and making sure that we're meeting the changing needs of the community. Also, there's an opportunity to look at making a connection from the Jefferson community to the Weber River. And this could be possibly done over the overpass that would get us to the park. Going through the rail yard in certain areas is another possibility. But making a connection so the residents can get from their community to a great open space asset along the Weber River. When they looked at the transportation element, they looked at 4 elements here, and one is to enhance the local collector streets, another one is to enhance the arterial streets, and then provide solutions for some of the alleyways in this area. There's a lot of abutters alleyways, and they're not being used, and it creates a problem, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And then making sure that we have complete streets, looking at biking, looking at pedestrian access and vehicular access as well. So one of the things we looked at is oftentimes, and I find myself doing this, is when it comes to getting back and forth on Wall Avenue, sometimes I cheat a little bit and I take Pacific Avenue. It's a quick out, and I don't have to deal with so much congestion. But once you get a little bit closer northbound, you find yourself meandering through streets trying to get back up to Wall Avenue, and it's like a maze. And so it's looking at ways in which we can redesign Pacific Avenue so it just makes a better connection to Wall Avenue. And then the next one is recognizing Lincoln and Grant Avenue as real important streets, which they are. They're great streets, but things that we can do to enhance those as well. And another big thing is we wanted to look at ways in which we can provide good bicycle routes in the community. Making a connection. Right now we're looking at Grant Avenue as a great connection from the river to 25th Street, but we'd also like to see that carried from 25th Street down to 36th Street. And so this is an element that's put in the plan as well. Another element is improving the streetscape along Wall Avenue and Washington Boulevard. This can be done with street trees, sidewalks, lighting as well. Another element is looking at Doxey Street. There's a section of Doxey Street west of Wall Avenue that we've recommended to be closed, but only when the residents, and there's actually one business along there, CED, that they're in agreement to that. So it wouldn't just happen all at once. It would be, there's some property at the western end of Doxy in that section that is vacant, it's owned by the same owner, but then there's some residents as you move up, and then there's CED on the corner, and those would not be vacated until they no longer need access to them. The other one is looking at improving Doxy Street between Wall and Lincoln Avenue. In this section, we want to work with the existing right-of-way, and in some areas where we acquire right-of-way. And as we acquire that right-of-way, in certain areas we will be able to have sidewalk, in certain areas we won't be able to, and so we want to work with the existing homes that are there, that we don't end up impacting the homes when those improvements go in. The next section that we looked at, and this is the alleyways that I'd like to chat a little bit about, and the areas in pink are what are called abutters alleys. And abutters alleys are everyone who abuts that alley actually owns a right to that alley. And so in order for them to vacate an alley, it has to be 100% buy-off, or else it's not vacated. And these alleyways are creating problems in the community because it creates a quick in and a quick out for drug dealers, and certain crimes have been happening back in this area, and it's created a problem. And so we want to look at solutions to accommodate for this. You know, if they're not being able to be vacated, is there some way we can put some gates up so that they don't have a quick in and a quick out for vehicular access? Obviously that's not going to impact pedestrian traffic flow, but or maybe we do some type of community garden back in that area, are some things that were explored. The next element is we looked at the sidewalks and certain areas where we could install sidewalks to create better pedestrian routes to the school or just throughout the neighborhood. And then areas where we should maintain some of the sidewalks. Oh. And then also there's certain areas where lighting is not as great as it should be, and so is there some things that we can do to improve the lighting. We like to, the typical lighting standards is that there's a light at each intersection, and then there's also a light at the mid-block. And there's certain areas where we don't have that happening, and we want to see that happen. And then also things that we can do to improve the road surface in certain areas. There's certain areas where we have some pretty big potholes, and some things that we can do to improve that. So in closing, the Jefferson Community Plan, we're looking at expanding the boundaries into the blue area from the red area. And we feel that the things that we've talked about and in the community plan, it's going to enhance this community and make it stronger. There's a lot of great things that are happening in the community right now, but there's also some things that we can do to make it better. And the things that I've talked about are things that the steering committee and the planning commission feel will accomplish that.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Grover?
Later.
Later?
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Now we will receive public input on the Jefferson Community Plan. Just come on up.
We really would like to hear from you.
I was going to say we could take the mic to her. We'll just bring the mic over to you.
I'm scared of mics. Can you hear me? Around the Marshall White area, you mentioned parks, but we need more parking space here.
Gayleen.
I would like to bring up a plan area.
Are any of you familiar with 36th and Lincoln, where that big grass area is by Lincoln Plaza? It's nothing but grass and pieces of building and weeds. I thought I'd bring it to your suggestion. It's the last mayor, I talked to him about it and he never did reply. Not you, the old mayor, never did do anything about it, so I thought I would bring it up. It's on 36th and Lincoln. It's a big square area. It's across from Costco's, and it just sits there and grows weeds and rocks and trash in there. I thought I'd bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lexi Lunt, and I own a property on Patterson Street. It's half a block west of Washington Boulevard. Many years ago, I'm trying to think, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago, there was the big master plan of 30th and 31st Street, and the State Road Department of Transportation, they had some public meetings about how those corridors would be maybe looked at in the future. And really, they did all these studies, but then nothing ever happened, really. And I wondered if any of that was still being investigated, because my property sits right in between 30th and 31st Street in that Patterson Street. What would happen to that street? So if 30th and 31st still remain the in and out, east and west corridors, what would happen to that in-between street? At the time, we questioned, my husband and I went to that meeting, and we asked the state planner, and they said, well, they really didn't have any plans for that street because it was a little too far. It was just far enough from either side of those two streets, north and south, to have any plans for it at all.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Barbara Peters. I just moved here from Summit County. I live on 33rd Street between Grant and Child Street. I'm really impressed with the city. We moved here because of the availability of housing and the good infrastructure you have and the economic development that you've historically done. My question is, and I'm sorry I was late, is there any demographics on this about the makeup of the community of this area? What percentage are homeowners? How many are rentals? Also, the gentleman mentioned a crime rate on the alley. I live on an alley where there's access to my house. I don't have much crime in my street. We're a very close-knit neighborhood. Also, I'd like to find out if there's a theme for this. In planning, one of the important things is to understand the demographics and the way the community relates to the city and contributes to the city. I live near the Odyssey School, and there seems to be a very close network of people walking to businesses and stuff, which this does not address. Instead of it being, open for bikes, which is really good, is the fact that how does this relate to your community? How does it improve it? How does it show that Ogden is an interesting area to live and vital? I didn't get that from this plan, and I apologize, but I would like to know that more from a city planning management.
Thank you.
Yes, my question is relative to the commercial property you're talking about changing over on Grant between 27th and 30th. We have commercial building there, and we have a business there, and you wanted to rezone it to an R4. I'd like to know the impact it's going to have on us.
My name is Terrell Miranda. I'm the supervisor in charge of Marshall White Center. About 4 years ago, Ogden Weaver Community Action took part in a partnership agreement with Ogden City, decided to manage this place. Since I've been here, we had a tremendous growth here. It went from 500 visitors a month to over 3,000. So as we're planning this out, I think we need to really look at the recreation possibilities of this property right here behind us. If you come down here on Saturdays and Sundays, there's a lot of people that are playing soccer. That's one of the areas we need to look at for growth. The parking here is just not enough of it. And it's a blessing, but it's bad. We never expected 3,000 people a month to visit this center. But it's happened. We definitely need more parking. We need to upgrade the basketball court out there. It was donated by one of the jazz players back in 1972, Mark Eaton. And if you go out there now, there's still a stone out there that has his name where they dedicated that, and it definitely needs to be refurbished. But I think we need to look at the recreation here in the center, this area. There's tons and tons of youth coming here. A lot of the visitors, not just from Central Ogden now, they're coming from everywhere, from the East Bench, the east side, the west side, the north side, and the south side. So this community center has become an icon here in Ogden City, and we need to continue to preserve it and invest in the recreation and the future of Marshall Whites. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's David Bornemeyer. I'm a business owner, Western Gateway Storage Company, which is a nearly 100-year-old company, been in Ogden nearly 100 years. I purchased the company in August of 2011. Being a resident of Davis County, hadn't come back to Ogden for years, and noticed the downtown had transformed in the space of about a decade. Been very excited about it. As far from a business standpoint, I'm actually really excited about the land at the end of, we own land west of Wall, between 28th and about 27th. I'm excited about its redevelopment possibilities. Obviously, I'm not made of money to the chagrin of my wife. However, what we would like to do is, I would like to see some type of, if there are incentives available from the city, as well as some type of, how do I say that? Some type of leadership from the council as well as the mayor's office to push some type of beautification, some type of entrance to the city, down to the downtown that you guys have pushed to be redeveloped and beautified. The downtown looks gorgeous. I would love to have that entrance into the city continued from the freeway into downtown.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lucy Bill. Yeah, excuse me right now, but I'm not only a resident of Ogden. I've been here, and my family's been in the 32nd area for about over 40 years, and I'm also a business owner on 24th Street. My question to you guys is the alleys. On 32nd Street, we are required to keep those alleys clean, but yet and still, we don't really know all our neighbors, especially, you know, new people coming in from out of town and that type of thing. I think most of that is renters now. You know, I'm a homeowner there, but most of it's renters. And at one point, because I keep my yard up quite well, that Ogden City comes in and tells me I have to keep the whole alley. To the point they brought me everybody's business. I got social security numbers, everything from 32nd Street all around there. Because he felt like nobody else was keeping up, so he thought he'd target me. I'm a single woman. I live in a house by myself. Also the water. I know it's out north. My family lives out north, and that's where I grew up. I grew up pretty much in both areas because my grandmother lived down there, and that's where I live now. Their water is much cheaper, even though there's 3 people living in that house, and I pay more than they pay each month. And I think that's all totally ridiculous. These alleyways, we required to keep them up, keep them mowed, keep them where there's no weeds, but nobody give us nothing for that. But yet and still, you have renters, and I don't know if other homeowners are getting fined or not. That was the only first time I ever got that. That was about 5 years ago. They don't keep that alley mowed. They don't keep it up. There was a car exploded in the alley, and I'm like him. When you come into the city, in my business, where I'm on 24th Street, you started to put trees and flowers there, but nobody kept it up. So it don't look like you're coming into Ogden City. We get a bad rap in Ogden City that we're such criminals. And there probably is criminals. Most of the time it's young kids on young kids. And then sometimes when the police comes out, they just slapping each other. They just slapping them on the hands. I have experienced that myself on 36th Street, and I'm quite sure these police right back here understand what I'm talking about. I done watch Utah police come in, Utah State Police come in. I done watch Ogden come in. I done watch the way they treat the kids when they do come in to certain houses, so they just act up. We need something. We need this community center back. Like he said, there's like 3,000 people coming in here now. Before, when I was coming up in this neighborhood, I grew up on 28th and Wall. You didn't put no money into Marshall White Center. Then when they closed the Deseret Industry, all of a sudden, you start putting money into the pools and everything else. I was shocked because I came here probably before that, in the pool, it was cold, it was terrible. And then all of a sudden when I came back, it was upgraded. We need to invest in our youth in Ogden City. We need to bring them back into the Marshall White Center and thrive. We need everything updated. We're not that bad. There's not that many bad kids out there. If you give them something to do, they won't be involved with all this mess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others? Oh.
Excuse me, but I do. Up on Orchard, you guys gave grants to update those homes. I've been up there, I've been in those homes. We need grants down here. Our economy is low, business is slow. We need grants to update our houses down here so we don't get such a bad rap, because when you go down 32nd Street, and that's a busy street, there's been kids hit down there because, you know, not so much because of the thing, because the cars are parked the way they park because there really isn't no parking for some of the people. But we need grants also. It just can't not go up on 22nd and Orchard, 24th and Orchard. We need to bring it downtown too. You want to build up downtown? You want people to come in? I hear that Ogden wants to be the sports mecca. Well, we need to make it the sports mecca. We mean to make it somewhere where people want to come and enjoy Ogden, instead of thinking that we're like West Valley. We ain't got half of West Valley going on. My brother lives in West Valley. We don't have half of that going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's only what people create.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have someone address those. Thank you.
Got a number of things, but I don't know if I remember them. One thing I'm thinking in particular, our church is at 28th and Wall Avenue. And before we built the new one, we had a smaller church. And we had a house next door to it. Police enforcement was really bad. I don't think it's gotten that much better. It takes a real long time when you call and ask for assistance. You can sit there for 2 hours and you never see a police officer. And so if we call, we need you to come. Glad to hear that we have somebody in our area that we can go to. I don't know their number or who they are, but I feel I'm just as important. I hear so much from my clients who come in. I counsel there at my church that they don't want to come down there. They're scared of coming down in that area. That's the worst area to be in this inner city, Ogden. Well, there's crime up on the bench. There's crime up in them high areas. They may have more money to hide it, but they have more crime up there too. So we get tired of being targeted all the time. So 25th Street and all that people have said, and Washington Boulevard looks wonderful to a certain point, and then at another point you stop, like the rest of us are not important. because people are not going to come down that way. There's nothing really going on. Well, if you're going to do it in one area, then you need to do it in the other area, wherever the money is coming from, because you're getting money to do what you want to do. So want to do that so that you can get some. The lighting is terrible, things that have been addressed, and we hear these things, what's going to be done. That's why citizens don't have confidence in administration of this city, because you talk. You do good talking, you get us coming, and you get us hoping that things happen. I've been to so many meetings, different kinds of meetings. I'm Shirley Miller, and nothing happens. Jefferson School, went there, given the idea if you come and speak and let your voices be known, something was going to change. Well, you already had in mind what you were going to do. You were going to close it, but you were going to pacify us that you were going to keep it open. And so that hurt a lot of people. At that time, you had children going to 5 different schools. They played with each other, so they couldn't even stay up at the area that they went. And so the friendships that they developed, they were just at the school, because they couldn't come down. They had to come on the bus. Parents didn't have cars. More lighting needs to be done for anybody that wants to walk. You know, I drive around here, so I don't walk around here, I drive. I wouldn't walk these streets. I see people walking, I want to pull over and stop and say, honey, get in the car, because it's not safe walking in the dark. Even if nobody bothers you, the sidewalk itself will kill you. You're just trying to stumble, you know, through it. And so we did a drive around. Not only did I do it with the committee, I did it with me and Honey, up and down the street, just looking and seeing what's there. So it says that we're not cared about, this area is not cared about. And if you want people to know they're cared about, get in touch with us. I know it's hard sometimes to get us together, but that shouldn't stop you, because you take our tax money. You know, we pay you taxes too. And if we pay your taxes too, what you need to do is say you're just as important as somebody else paying taxes, because sometimes they're getting away with paying less tax than we are. And if the city got weeds places and other places got weeds, leave Emmanuel alone and stop sending us all them letters. And we riding around the city and we seeing weeds sky high, and they sky high. That week you send us the letter, or 1 month after you send us the letter, and 3 months after you send us the letter, the weeds are still high. So I don't know what kind of end they got, or money that they got, that they can just have those weeds. Maybe they don't pay attention to your letters. They don't mean much to them, but they mean much to us. And we go out and see that it's done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shirley.
I'm just kind of new to all this, so I'm trying to figure it out, but I want to be more involved. So I just was wondering if, like, what the time plan is to accomplish all of those things. I thought a lot of them sounded really positive for the city. Oh, I'm Rachel Formaster, and I'm from Ogden. But also, I just didn't know, this is probably a silly question, but I don't know, like, the budget, like, where it comes from, so I was just curious as to, like, where that comes from, too. And that's just some of my questions.
Thank you.
Hey, I work with Ogden Weber Community Action Partnership, and one of the things that a lot of our residential council members, which is made up of low-income members from the Ogden area, as well as a lot of our clients, I guess, complain about, and you do have it in your plan, is the state of the sidewalks, and the sidewalks being ADA accessible. And we have a lot of our clients who have to take their wheelchairs down the street because they can't get through good clear paths to and from where they need to go. And a lot of them don't have access to transportation, so they have to walk or take their wheelchair to grocery stores or to do a lot of their day-to-day living items. And so I would definitely love to see some of your those pieces of the plan put into place, because it would really help them have some safe ways to get to and from where they need to for their day-to-day activities.
Thank you.
I'm Pastor John Miller, the pastor of Emmanuel Church of God in Christ. My question is, as you know, down between 27th and 28th is Doxy. And I could be wrong, but I heard that they had planned to put sidewalks down through Doxey at one time, but that never happened. So I was wondering if that's still one of the plans, to put sidewalks down Doxey. Now, Doxey is not a street that goes all the way through. It's kind of like an alley street. The other thing is, there is a lot of work I would like to get done, and what I would like to know is, and most of the time, the separation of church and state, can we get a grant to accomplish some things as a church?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we need it so we can record it.
Oh, I'm sorry. My thing is, we come, like Sister Miller said, we come to these meetings, we've been coming for years and years and years, and nothing really seemed to get done. I would hope that with all of this, that you would set something so we can see something. You know, maybe take little steps at a time, baby steps. Don't wait and do something big all at the same time, but show us that what you plan, that you're going to do it, and then we'll have faith in you that you're going to do something. So do something, even if it's one little thing this year and the next 2 years or something, but we come to these meetings and we don't see any difference. We just talk and plan, and no one ever get anything done. My mother's house has been up for, they saying they're going to get that house there on 30th and Wall. It's been 25, almost 30 years, and it's still there. They all come with different plans each time, and nothing's changed. So if you can just maybe give us something to go on, to prove to us that you guys are working towards something that you say that you're doing, we would appreciate that very much. And my name is Lovey Harrison. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing, I'd like to make a suggestion, and last year, or year before last, I saw a couple of policemen in our lot, and I thought that was a good idea. They were probably doing some of their work, records, straightening up their records. I didn't think that was a bad idea. In fact, I would like to see more of that in our neighborhood, to keep our neighborhood safe. If they just want to stop by and do update their records, for me it's fine. I thought that was an excellent idea. And they can do that with no complaints. And one of these days we'll get our parking lot completely filled, and they can just pull in and stop and do what they need to do. And that way they'll keep people will see them and keep the neighborhood straight.
Thank you, Pastor.
Any other public comment? Public input, I guess it would be. Motion to close the public input.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we now close the public comments.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion from Vice Chair Garner to close the public input and a second from Councilmember Van Hoosier. This is a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay. With that.
We can have them answer questions.
Yeah. Okay. Now we'll turn the time over to Mr. Grover, have him answer a list of questions.
Quite a few questions I'd like to answer. First, I'd like to just talk about the demographics. One lady was concerned about, have we done demographics of this area? And we've looked at those extensively. We looked at the population count in 1990, 2000, 2010. We've also looked at, and it's interesting, the population has changed a bit. At the present time, it's switched a little bit. Right now we have more males, 53.9% males versus 46.1% female in this area. We've also looked at just the exact kind of the housing units, how many are occupied, how many are not occupied. And what we've found is that we have about 89% occupancy rate in 2000. However, unfortunately, in 2010, it's went down. It's 88.3%. We've also found two versus renters versus owners. That has also went down too. And so some of the things that we've talked about to strengthen the neighborhood, and that is we're hoping will increase home ownership and people wanting to live in the community. Some of the other comments that were discussed was looking at the corridors and what should happen as we come into the entries to the city with 30th and 31st Street, and that's also discussed in the plan, and that's very much needed. The general plan is general guidelines, and so there was an individual that indicated, well, they don't see anything being done. Well, what happens is with this general plan, how this works is when the council looks at the capital improvement plan, they look at these community plans, and if we have these things identified in the community plan, that's when actions can be taken and improvements can be made. For instance, in the past, in 1985, when the general plan was put in place, the original Jefferson Community Plan, one thing it talked about was the need to improve the public parks. And at that time, we had the Athletic Park on Wall Avenue, and there was a lot of problems happening there. And the general plan at that time said, let's look at how we can improve this area. And what was suggested is that we move the park off of Wall Avenue, off of a busy street, and put it into the neighborhood. And that's what happened. Because of that plan, and because it was put on a capital improvement plan, that park was relocated, and that's why we have Jefferson Community Park today. And it's a great asset to the community. We would not have had that if it hadn't been identified in the original Jefferson Community Plan. Another individual mentioned at 27th and Grant Avenue, what's going to happen to their business now if we look at rezoning that? What would happen is it would be non-conforming. It would still be legal to stay there. There would be no issues with that being there. What we've done is we looked at the whole corridor as a whole and what's going to benefit that whole section, and so that's why that was suggested there. Another individual spoke about incentives. What can we do to create incentives or grants? And that's definitely been looked at in the community plan because the steering committee was very concerned about that. How can we make improvements to the homes? And so that's why there was some suggestions about looking at ways in which we can put some of the homes on the historic register to get tax credits. Another element that was looked at was how can we improve some of the actual grants and matching grants. And while we don't have those in place, if we have those identified in the community plan, when we look at that down the road, those are things that can be looked at. Another individual talked about beautification of entryways, which I've already talked about. That was mentioned a few times. Another individual, Lucy, talked about the alleyways and some of the problems that are associated with that. And I share in her sympathies, and that's why that's indicated in the plan, things that we can do to improve those alleyways, because that is a huge problem in this community. And another individual talked about how can we create better utilities and improvements of those, and those are discussed also in the plan. That was, we looked at the existing infrastructure of the water, sewer, all the utilities, and where we can make improvements. Another individual talked about the sidewalks, and I totally agree with them about the sidewalks. There's issues with those sidewalks, and while the statements in the general plan are general, that's what the general plan is. It's general. But, as I mentioned before, when the council looks at making improvements with the capital improvement plan, they look specifically at the community plans. And if we don't have that identified in the Jefferson Community Plan, it's not going to happen. Another individual talked about the police presence. And that lady, she was a great asset. She was on the steering committee, and Shirley, and I so appreciate her comments because that's so true. We need to get the word out and improve the police presence in this area. Another individual, I think it was Rachel, and she asked about what's the time for completion. And at the end of the general plan, there is actually who's responsible and how that element will be implemented. And so which department takes the lead on that certain thing. So for instance, on that rezone that I mentioned at 27th and between 27th and 28th Street on Lincoln Avenue. In that section, it has the planning department taking the lead on that because we would instigate that rezone. When it comes to the parks and improving the parks, the people that take the lead on that, as indicated in the plan, it would be the Parks and Recreation and Public Ways would take the lead on that, and then the planning department would also help support that. So each one of those items, it talks about how that would actually be implemented at the end of the plan. Let's see. Another individual indicated what has happened with the previous plans. Nothing happens. And in fact, when we went back and looked at all the rezone requests from the 1985 general plan, most everything except for one had been completed. And it was because of what was identified in the 1985 general plan. And I mentioned about the change of the parks. When we, changed the Athletic Park to the Jefferson Park, and that was based upon the community needs. The community expressed an interest, crime problems there. They wanted it located in the neighborhood, and so that was done. So those are the things that I had noted. I'm not sure if I got them all, but I'm sure
Rick,
that...
let me bring up a couple more.
Please.
Just one was the impact of a zone change for those commercial businesses that are already in place.
Yes, what would happen on those is they would be considered legal non-conforming, so they would be able to stay there as long as they desire. And then at such time when they decide to redevelop that area, then they would fall under the existing zoning that would be in place.
I'll just go through a few more. Parking at the Marshall White Center. Well, we've talked about all the things about how to upgrade the park and make it more usable, and definitely soccer, even 7 days a week, that field could have soccer players out on that field. And if you come down on any weekend day, you'll see them there. So, just to make sure that we do address that as part of this plan.
Yeah, that's indicated. Well, it's general language on things that we can do to improve the Marshall White Center based upon the community needs.
Right. And then another one Pastor Miller brought up was Doxey Street.
Yes, Doxey Street. Okay. Actually, we have a subdivision that has went through the preliminary stages, and it has Doxey Street being extended. So we would have a connection between Wall Avenue and Lincoln, and there would be sidewalk provided in certain areas along that section, so we make a pedestrian connection as well.
Okay. Another one that several citizens brought up, is just the Butters Alleys. Those are, throughout the city, not just in this community plan, but throughout the city. Can you explain the process just for some of the citizens who are here, that if the whole block wanted to vacate that Butters Alley, what the process would be to help them?
You bet. Actually, what the city has done is we've taken the lead on helping people with the Butters Alleys while it's actually a county. They're the ones that actually do it. What happens is everyone who, our forefathers, when they created those alleyways, what happened is everyone who abuts that alley actually owns a portion of that alleyway. And so what happens is if one person says, no, we don't want to vacate that alley, what happens is they can't vacate the alleyway, which is unfortunate because then if 99% of them wants to vacate it, they can't because of that 1%. And so what we wanted to look at is exploring ideas. If that 1% won't buy off on it, can we put gates at each end so people can't go back and forth, and have a lock so that the people that are along there have a key to it and they can access that? Or possibly having a community garden. These are things that were explored. They're not mentioned specifically in the community plan, but they were explored with the steering committee and with the planning commission on how we can improve those alleyways and make them more safe.
Okay. My understanding is that the alleys were not well kept. Is that true?
That is so true. And that's not just in the Jefferson community, but it's all throughout the city. We have some issues with those abutters alleys. And unfortunately, when they're public alleys, we have the ability to take the interest in it because we own them and we want them kept up. But on abutters alleys, it creates a little bit of a fly in the ointment because we don't actually have any type of jurisdiction over them. And in fact, we can't actually vacate them. We provide a form at the front counter. If anyone would like to vacate an alleyway, we have an abutters application that we provide for courtesy at the front counter of the municipal building, but they actually have to take that to the county and have that recorded.
Well, the suggestion I was going to have is that on a Make a Difference Day that we have annually in Ogden, that if the church wants to organize a group, we could go in and maybe clean out those alleys on that particular day. So that would be some idea that you may want to look at in this area.
Yeah. Another element, when you brought up the churches, that's mentioned in the community plan and it was not discussed, is that we talked about working with the churches to help educate some of the people in the area of what is expected of them as far as keeping up their properties and improving the value of their properties, and just kind of a little bit about some of the city ordinances, because there's great churches in this community and letting them take somewhat of the lead too.
One other concern that was brought up is the lady back here behind Dr. Carpenter. She was just saying that they came to her and said she's responsible for the entire alley. My understanding is you're only responsible for that piece right behind your house.
Typically, you are just responsible for that piece behind your house, but because everyone who abuts it owns it, actually everyone is responsible. They can't just go to one person and say, you're responsible for it. Everyone who abuts that alleyway is responsible for everything.
I just wanted that clarification, so that'll help her.
So they're not going after one person to take care of it and clean it up. Everybody that abuts that alley would get the notice to mitigate the problem?
They should, but if it happens to be a public alley, then there's other, and I'm not sure which one her alleyway is. I don't know if it's an abutters or a public, but most of them are abutters alleyways.
I'll follow up with her after and find out where that's at.
And so if somebody wanted to get their alley closed, they could come to the planning department. You have the form. You can give them information about the steps to go through to get that done, and maybe even give them tell them how to access the plat map so they can see the ownership information and things like that.
Definitely. And we've done that many
It would be important that
times.
you make sure that it's in English and not in some kind of a legalese. You know, sometimes those instructions are somewhat difficult to follow because of
Right.
the language that's there, but
And the form there, the planning department created it, not the legal department, so.
there you go. That's the I have a question, Mr. Grover. In my former life as a planning commissioner, we talked about when we do these community plans to get a top 5 projects that are on the top of the list. Is there such a thing in this community plan?
There is. How it is at the very end of the community plan, it has what are the important ones that should be addressed, and also throughout the community plan it has a note below each one that says high priority,
Right.
and so it identifies that as well.
So we as a city council can look through those things that are marked as high priority as the things that should be done first or should be funded first.
Exactly.
You know, I think that's an important thing that the community needs to understand is we look at these community plans in a very comprehensive way, and if we were to do all of those things, there's just not enough money to do everything that's in there in a short amount of time. And so it's a long-range document that so have patience and understand that these things are going to take a long time to be funded, and maybe even some of the priorities change over the period of time, and that does happen.
Can I just wanted to make one follow-up to that. Every year in the budget, well, starting a couple of years ago, the City Council actually sets aside $150,000 specifically for community plan projects. So, you know, we will take all these projects, the high priority ones, into consideration in this budget cycle. And I just wanted to make one other comment. I noticed in the document there was some concern that the city did away with the spring cleanup, and I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that we do offer a free dumpster you have to have 5 neighbors sign a form, and you can have that dumpster delivered once a year for free. So it takes the place of the spring cleanup. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is thank you to all of you for spending your evening here and all the time you put into the community plan, and onward.
Thank you. And Sister, or Mrs. Shirley Miller, she brought up the police presence. And many of you were at the last meeting when Officer Travis Williams was there. He gave out his phone number and his cards, you know, to several people who were there. But if you need that phone number, his phone number is 801, and I'll when you're ready, come up to me, Shirley, and I'll give it to you. 940-6180. He works typically Tuesday through Friday, 7 to 5, right in the community. So he's down here those days. He's out of town right now, but I, you know, have his number right in my phone too, because I call him. But I'll get that phone number for you, and we'll make. He's made a big difference down here. He patrols, and he wants to know the citizens, and he met with many of you during that last meeting. So he's a good guy. He is.
I think the 4 principles that we're trying to achieve, not only as a community but as citizens here in Ogden, is that we have property maintenance, that each one of us are responsible for our own property, but if we can collaborate with our neighbors, the magnitude is magnified considerably. Create healthy streets. I'm sure we all want something like that, and Neil has mentioned that with police presence. Establish high priority of designated issues. There are certain things that are at the top of the list that we need to take a look at and see if we can put a timetable on those for completion. And the other one was the alleyways, and I think if through creativity we can address the alleyways and make them functional aspects. But I think those 4 points are very essential, not only in the community plan, but in our own communities that we live in.
no further comment?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grover.
If there's no further discussion, I would just go ahead and make a motion that we adopt proposed ordinance 2013-7.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Gochner to adopt proposed ordinance 2013-7 and a second from Councilmember Heyer. This is a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gochner?
Aye.
Councilmember Heyer?
Aye.
Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember Van Hoosier? Aye. Councilmember Wicks?
Aye.
Vice Chair Gardner?
Aye.
Chair Blair?
Aye. That passes. Again, thank you for all of your comments and all of your work and effort, not just in this meeting, but all the meetings leading up to this. Next is public comments. This is an opportunity to address the council regarding your concerns or ideas. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. In this form of government, all city personnel are the responsibility of the administration, not the council. Please discuss any concerns you have regarding staff with the mayor, chief administrative officer, or department directors.
So if you have any further comments, we'd love to hear from you.
I heard a lot of responses. Excuse me, my name's David Bornemeyer again, owner of Western Gateway Storage Company, which is now included in the Jefferson Plan. Heard a lot of comments regarding the residential side, and I absolutely agree with you. There are lots of priorities within. However, as I sit back on the back row, I'm thinking, as an entrepreneur, I'm looking at what can be done within this community. You're also limited by the amount of funding that you're able to provide. When I made my comment regarding incentives, I'm a big believer in capitalism, in the free market. From your perspective, it's kind of a chicken or the egg. Do you incentivize or provide greasing of the wheels, so to speak, for businesses to come in and provide extra tax base and extra revenue that then allows you to dump back into the residential side? From my perspective, I see a great, like I said, I grew up and came up through Weber State in the 2000 area. Excuse me. Coming up, downtown has changed drastically. I would like to see that same vision that you took downtown. Use it along Washington. Use it along Wall Avenue, along 30th and 31st. Build that. Lead us. Bring those businesses in. We will create tax base so that you can dump back into better sidewalks, so that if you're not mugged on the sidewalk, you don't get killed by tripping over one of the cracks. Like I said, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I believe Ogden has a lot going for it. Right along Wall Avenue and throughout many of the corridors, there's a lot of potential. And from this humble business owner, I plead with you guys, grease those wheels, get us going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Paul Nanny. We have a commercial business between 28th and 29th. And I looked at that property down there, and there's probably about 6 businesses in that block. And what you're telling us is that if we choose not to keep that business going, is that we're going to have to convert it back over to an R4 business, and those lots are all about a 1/4 acre. I don't know what you can build on a 1/4 acre, but it doesn't seem to be very reasonable. I have also a vacant lot down there. It's, by the way, which you guys forced on me to go commercial, which you now charge me about 3 times as much on that vacant lot, saying that it's commercial now. And so now that I got burdened with that, I told you I'd rather keep it at residential because I didn't want to pay the taxes at that point. But you forced it on me about 3 years ago. And so now we're paying commercial property taxes on that. And what you're going to end up doing on that again, I have to look at it and I said, what can I use it for in an R4? It's a 1/4 acre. And what am I going to build on that thing? It's nothing but a single dwelling. And it's not going to go very well. You've devalued the property and you've pushed us to the point where I don't know if I want to put any more money back into the area. You're asking us to move out, basically. So anyway, it bothers us that you're looking at that kind of approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm up here. Again, Shirley Miller, I appreciate you and all the things that you said, and on your faces, for some of you, the encouragement that I feel from you, that things will happen and that they will change, you know, here. So some of what's said. I'm not a great paper reader, so if you're putting stuff in the paper all the time, I'm not knowing about it. One thing helps in our particular communities is our churches, and so if you want to get the word out, get it to the churches, get it to the pastors, where the congregation, where the people are, and then they can have that kind of information that they happen to need. That would really be helpful to us. And yes, I want to look and see something going on. I want to see something happening, and that lets me know my voice has been heard, because you can listen. But if you don't hear what I said, there's a difference in listening to me and hearing me. Hearing says you understand and you do. Listening means you just listen. And that's all you did, with whatever else was going on in your mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys going to have to excuse my appearance because I really wasn't planning. I was planning on coming, but then time got away from me. And anyhow, like I said, I grew up in this community, from North Ogden to Ogden City. I worked in Layton for 15 years. I seen the difference of business. I was in Layton when business wasn't there. There was nothing in Layton. But it was easy to move in and build business in Layton because the taxes wasn't so bad. Ogden seemed to be so hard to come in and bring business. And also, I'm not for sure, but when Mayor Godfrey was in office, they talked about enterprise money, which they took, I believe, and built downtown Ogden with. I felt like they tore down a perfectly beautiful building to build up what they have now. And we still don't have parking. I know some of the contractors that built the parking back there. They didn't even want their wives to park in the parking there. I understand that they have reinforced that, so it's more safer now. And like I said, I own a business on 24th, and I also live on 32nd Street. I could have chosen to live anywhere else I wanted to. But I wanted my youth to see that in the community, you could be who you want to be. I graduated from Ben Lomond. My father graduated from Ogden High. So you know there was rival there. So I'm saying to Ogden City, let's come together. Let's give our kids something to hope for and build. And you want to know about the alleyway? The reason I was picked out in the alleyway, that most of y'all don't know, most of my property runs all the way across, where some people just got a little strip like this and they still won't take care of it. Ogden City came in and they said they did this alleyway, and I asked the young man, oh man, Ogden City's finally doing all the alleyway? He said, no, I'm only doing this part. But he was kind enough to go ahead and do my part. And I respected that. I thanked him for that. I appreciated that. But we need to bring that enterprise money where it needs to really be. I mean, we want to build this stuff, but we got to build it from the ground up. We can't go up, then down. And I've worked in Ogden City. I worked in Layton. I've been in South Ogden. I listen to everything that goes on. I stay in this community. I try to stay on the boards that would help people of color most of the time. I've never really been to a meeting here before. Besides when Mayor Godfrey came in trying to shut down the Marshall White. I had an issue with that. And so today I thought it was important for me to be here as a business owner, as a person who grew up here. Because I look around me, there's a lot of people who don't even live in Ogden City. But I'm quite sure they own property, either their parents left them, or they bought into it. Because let's face it, it's doing just like any other major city. You tear down your downtown so you can build it up so you can get it at a lesser cost. That's the way I see it. I deal with contractors that have, I'm friends with them, that have built right next door to me where my job is, the IRS building. And I've been at their parties where they're talking about, and it's a big joke to them, they get the money up on the bench, but we don't get it down in Ogden City. And they don't even realize who they're talking to half the time. So it's not let's just sit here and be bored with Lucy or sit here and be bored with Ogden City. Let's do something about it. And I realize some of the money that we have, we can't do everything at once, but we can do the small things that really count. That really count in this community. Because most of it don't even stay in this community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say something about the Jefferson Park on 33rd and Grant. I helped with the committee years back when they brought that park in, where it used to be John Athletics Park on, what was it, Wall and 35th, and now they put Westland Ford there. Anyway, last summer, I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I was down in that area early in the morning walking my dogs, and last summer, I bring it to your attention that there were people sleeping in that picnic area. I thought I'd let you know. So maybe the police would be more on the lookout at Jefferson Park there, because I caught 2 or 3 people sleeping there every time I went and walked down there. And like I said, I helped with the committee in bringing that park in. I just thought I'd let you know. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Okay. If there's no more public comments, then we'll have comments from the administration.
I'm going to echo the thanks for everybody coming out and participating in this important public process tonight. We have heard, not just listened to, your comments and concerns, and it really does help our departments as we make decisions with very limited resources on the small things we can do that do matter. So again, I know it's late and everybody's got things and families and responsibilities, and I just want to echo the gratitude for coming out and taking the time to invest in this process. So thank you.
Okay. Council staff.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
And council members.
I also would like to thank the community as a former planning commissioner to try to put together a community plan. It really requires you, and I know it takes a lot of time out of your lives to put this together, but you're the ones who really know what's going on in your community, and we appreciate the input that you put forward. We can guess all day long, but we'll get it wrong without your input, and we appreciate you being a part of this.
I think it's gratifying to know that our citizens have an interest in where they're living and have pride in their community, and that's what we saw here this evening, and I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your ideas and addressing the issues that's before us. It's like eating an elephant, but we'll do it one bite at a time.
I'm going to chime in a little bit because this is my neighborhood. This is where I live. I grew up in this neighborhood, and you know, this has been my home. I lived on Pingree as a child, and I live over on 32nd Street now. And so I take a lot of pride in my home. And it's important to me, you know, and as Pastor Miller's looking at me too, going, yeah, me too. It's important for me that we get some of these things done for the people who live here, you know, and we're grateful that you came out tonight. It's very, very important for us to hear from you. Many of you, you know, I call you my friends because I see you on a regular basis. I hear from you, emails, and call you on the phone. And so please continue to let us know what your concerns are so that we can grease the wheel to get things done. And appreciate your feedback tonight. Thank you.
I too would just like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. As mentioned earlier, not just tonight, but throughout this whole process. This isn't a one-time plan, that this one-night plan. This took a long time and a lot of effort went into it, and I appreciate all of your input, and tonight the thoughts that went into that also.
Chair Clark, can we have those who are on committees, the steering committee, stand and be recognized?
Sure. I think it'd be great. All those who've served on different committees.
2 of the 3.
Yeah. I think this is a wonderful community, and this is a very proud community. I'm very excited about what's been brought forward tonight, and hopefully we can make those baby steps and start to see some improvements, some little improvements that will lead to major improvements. And I appreciate all the feedback we received tonight.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved, or?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn from Councilmember Heyer and a second from Vice Chair Garner. This is a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay, we're adjourned.